Got it, yeah. Okay.
I'm sure there's a more professional way to make this work, but I've yet to work it out.
There you go.
Yep. Okay, guys, welcome to tonight, to the lineup. I've done special slides for every wine, and then we can maybe do a retrospective on it. Let's look at the white, I guess, in its own sector. So now we're looking at, it took me a long time to really appreciate wines like Cape Mentel, SSB from Western Australia. But now looking into context of how the French are doing it, it always blew me away that Bordeaux charges so much money for that particular style. But tasting wines of this quality tonight kind of puts the whole thing in perspective for me. Just has the best of both worlds in terms of aromatic and full-bodied flavor. Background to this lot, the Malartic family, the original owners. I think Mr. Malartic worked for Napoleon, or then at that time period certainly worked for the French Navy, hence the boating logo, which is endured, passed to Arnaud Picot, who owns de Fusail and Domaine de Chevalier. Then Laurent Perrier took it over for a brief time, but the turning point was actually not either Picard or Perrier, but actually Michel Bonny and Alfred Alexandre Bonny. They made their money in detergent, doesn't make them bad people, and they invested humongous amounts of money in the winery. Most notably, they were one of the first name wineries to bring gravity-induced fermentation and processing of grapes to Bordeaux. It's interesting to see that in context of the New World experience, where it's certainly New Zealand I feel like it's almost always been the case, but not so in France. But they're certainly very famous for that now. They also were attributed to increasing the use of Semillon in the blend. Prior to the Bonnies taking it over, it was predominantly Sauvignon Blanc. We're talking about 5 to 10% at most. But the introduction of that extra Semillon really was something that took it to a different level. Lou, I don't want to use the phrase struck match, but there's definitely a smokiness about the wine for me in my nose as it is now. It's not overtly strong, but it's certainly something.
Faint, not. Yeah. It's not in your face. It's background as well. I mean, some of the ones we've had out of New Zealand in particular, like the last couple of dog points have been really strong.
Yeah. I think what really strikes me with it is this layering, just layers and layers, and it's kind of lacy and delicate, which is again super impressive.
Yeah,
I think that the smokiness just adds a dimension to the experience rather than being something that you stick a pin in. It just seems to meld its way into the lemon, the mango. There's definitely a lot of fruit, but very nuanced is probably the right word.
So where does a wine like this go over time?
I think it's got great. I mean, this is the thing that blows me away. I don't know if you remember that time we were in New Zealand and we did Dog Point Sauvignon Blancs. I think it was 10 or 12 years back. And I was rolling my eyes metaphorically when they suggested we do it. And when we did it, they're amazing wines. I think that for me, 10 years ago, 15, however long ago it was the turning point in my respect for Sauvignon Blanc and its ability to age. This is next level. I think the acids are just phenomenal.
This is of a different order, this one.
Yeah. Irrespective of varietal, I think the construct is so amazing. I can well understand A, the expense, and B, its cellar track.
But that Semillon's going to carry it along a long way. Big, broad shoulders. Right. So as the acid falls away, that Semillon's just going to fill it out. Right?
Yeah.
You can tell.
I think that the impact of the Semillon over time will be more and more profound relative to the Sauvignon Blanc. Sort of, yeah. Just thinking back to my memories of older New World samples of this, that's certainly how it goes. But with the ripeness and the quality of the Semillon, I can see why they decided to. It just adds richness to the matrix.
Yeah, when did they do that? Because I don't remember Malartic, Lagraviere Blancs being this rich before.
They say the turning point was 05, which was a really good year to do it, considering what 05 was like in Bordeaux generally. The critics make a big meal out of 05, 09, and 10 being the three vintages that defined the finest benchmarks of quality in recent times. That tracks most of Bordeaux. They're also suggesting 18 and 19 doing the same thing.
Well, in terms of whites or reds or both?
In terms of whites. And in terms of Malartic, Lagraviere.
Yeah, that's good. Very good.
I just love the interaction between the oak and the aromatics. It's so perfectly done and seamless as an experience. I think it's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to fault.
Mm.
Have you ever had the Haut Batailley white?
Yeah.
Because that runs about $800 a bottle or something.
Incredibly expensive. And I battled with the value coefficient of it. I guess for the same reason that I do with Haut Batailley Rouge, right? It's just so expensive. I'm not sure if it's justifiable. But in this price bracket, I can't think of anything that's been this impressive for me personally in my sort of limited experience with these. Have you experienced any of the Grand Cru whites?
From the Bordeaux
Yeah.
big ones. Yeah, a few, mainly out of Pessac. These guys and their neighbours, Chateau Olivier, make a very, very smart white. Last time I was in Bordeaux, I actually went and visited Malartic. That's why I bought some more of it this time. I just think they, on the value range and for quality, I just think they beat everyone.
Yeah.
In the field. They also make a lower level one. They call it the Reserve. I haven't tried it yet, but after seeing how good this is, and I think it's half the price. It's about $45-50, but it'll be interesting to see the difference between this and that. Actually, this is
just
good.
Lemon and cream. Jeez, it's good.
Mm.
There are references in various critics' notes about malic acid, and I'm not seeing any impact, not in my glass tonight.
Not yet.
Maybe as it warms up, it starts to show it. I'm not sure. But
No chance in my glass. Sorry, that was really nice. Oops, sorry. Oh, dear.
All right, let's have a look at the second one. So Carlmagnus, 2019. I was immediately annoyed by this guy because he fences for France. He looks like he should be on the cover of Forbes magazine, Men's Health. He owns 4 different castles, third generation one. I mean, it's just, the bloke goes on and on. These sort of super performers annoy me prima facie.
Well, he looks a bit too much like Roger Moore for my life.
Yeah, he does.
I was just going to say that.
I mean, the hair's a bit dark, I guess, but
Yeah, Miss Moneypenny. It's just annoying. When I saw the picture, and I bugger it, maybe it was taken 20 years ago or something. That's recent. It's how he looks these days. It's just ridiculous. So as usual, I got my maths wrong. We can't have 90% Merlot and 20 Cab Franc, but I'm pretty certain it's 80 Merlot. Let's have a look and see.
Right. This one's the odd man out. I selected this one on the recommendation of my main contact in Bordeaux.
Mm-hmm.
They just said, you must try this.
Well, I guess Fronsac maybe battles with a publicity problem.
Certainly, it's not a preferred or shishi area at all.
Yeah.
So when he said, "Oh, you must buy it," I went, "Oh, you're right. Well, you got 5,000 cases of it or something that you can't shift." So hopefully, he hasn't sold me a dud. This is the first time I'm trying it. So.
Well, I mean, the notion from, admittedly, that drink in 2022 comes from the winery, not from Advocate. But I think they're right. I think the drinkability factor is immediate. They've managed to create something here where the tannins are just they're super silky and ready to deal with.
That's nice ripe Merlot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all they say about it.
There's a lot of baked plums, like baked fruit for me in that, but it doesn't lean into the flabbiness outside of the spectrum. It's
there's richness without heat.
Yeah. On the nose, maybe some tapenade. I got whiffs of it to start, but the complexity of the dark fruit just is definitely for me the dominant. A couple of people pick up licorice. I don't see it tonight, but it's nice to consider that kind of juxtaposition of phenolics that some people might be able to pick up in their glass. Nice to have that sort of minty spectrum which cleaves away from the richness of the dark fruit.
So you don't think this is going to age, Robert?
Oh, it'll age, mate. But what I'm liking about it is it's you're not going to get kicked out of bed for opening it straight away.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Very approachable. Very approachable.
Because I think the structure of that Merlot, the quality of the tannic structure in the Merlot is really good. They talk about Carlmagnus being the epitome or the most important brand in Fronsac. And I was trying to think what else I might have drunk from that region. Nothing springs to mind. I ran out of time to do some more diligence on what else comes from there, but more than a couple of sources reference this as one of the most important, if not the most important.
Senejac? Is Senejac from there?
Look.
I'm just making it up now.
Siri's already checked off for the day, so I won't be able to talk to my phone and ask her.
But I mean, as a marker for the quality of the vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's this? $40 worth of wine. Wow.
Yeah. It's literally half the price of and more of everything else we're looking at tonight. So it's quite a nice benchmark, really, to just get a perspective on quality.
Very good.
If I was going to be super critical, it needs more length, but I think that's a question of time.
Well, yeah. Again, just as an outlying benchmark or a marker for the quality of this thing. I mean, the reason I bought heavily into 19 is because, first of all, everyone was waxing lyrical about how beautiful the weather was and perfect flower set at Verazon, et cetera, and everything was just perfect, right? But if we all remember, when the selling season started in 2020, it was right when COVID broke. And how can we not forget? So what was happening is negotiants and the growers were panicking because they had one of the best products they'd had in a decade, and all the buyers were either not
locked up in
phones or in hospital, and especially the China market froze. So we were able to pick up what I think is some excellent wines at very competitive prices. Because I haven't touched the en-primeur market since 2012, really, in any big way. But it was just too compelling. So that's why I decided for our clients just to, we'll get a whole bunch of different stuff. If nothing else, we'll have fun looking at it and see if we can pick up some more. A lot of these lines, unfortunately, are sold out globally already. So we'll only have a chance to look at it tonight and really not be able to drink it again. But
yeah,
some of the lines are fairly deep. Like this one, I'm sure there's bucket loads of it. But that's the story behind why we've actually even got them.
All right, having a look at next one. Forgive the spelling mistake somewhere. I don't know why or how the market has managed to pull out that claim in terms of when the 19th century 1855 classification was done. This was established as one of the top wines in Pomerol. I put it down there just to share it with you, but that comes off their site. I don't know how they came up with that, because to my understanding, there wasn't a delineation in that 1855 classification of wines by region. But nonetheless, if we take that for what they say, there was a time when Rouget was seen as one of the big performers. It's like many in Bordeaux suffered in the 80s and 90s, and the Lagraviere family were the turning point, more capital, of course. The benefits that Rouget has is 40 years of vines, and they have two different kinds of plots. They have various vineyards, but they have both clay and gravel or silica and silt on various sites. And what that's doing is lending very different personalities of wines to the final product. And some might make the argument that this creates, I guess, like the same way that Pinot Noir producers are very obsessed with single vineyard Pinot, but the most marketable is always the estate. For the same reason, this winemaking process, where they have such varying personalities of Merlot and Franc, but the final product as a combination seems to speak so well. They certainly have the right neighbors when it comes to asking for a cup of sugar. Église, Petrus, Le Gay, Le Pan, everything, right?
Nice real estate, yeah.
Yeah. I think that this rating from Suckling was the highest I could find ever. The Lagraviere family made their money in Beaujolais and have small interests in other parts of Bordeaux, but by far this is their largest acquisition outside of Beaujolais. Right off the bat for me, when I did the run-up on the noses of all the wines, this is the one that jumped out the most predominantly in the beginning, followed by the last wine. There's an inkiness that seems to prevail.
Very expressive. It's really expressive on the nose.
Quite interestingly, if you just an arbitrary note, Passac, they harvested a long time later than the whites in Bordeaux. This was mid-October, which seems very late. Probably, I'm not sure about how the weather was, but that probably means it was not terribly hot. It was just even, so they could leave it on there and not have to pull it off.
No, it was extraordinary weather conditions for the whole year.
I think what compels me to this is a sleekness, but at the same time, the tannins are quite muscular. It has a muscular form, but really resolved over on top of that. I love the savory nose, and this has got a long way to run. I'm tipping that this one and the final will be the two wines tonight that are going to become more and more progressive as the night goes on. That's a good nose. Yo!
Robert, we think this is amazing. It's so unique compared to a classic Bordeaux. It's quite special.
It's just that Merlot is just gun. It's so good. And I'm a huge fan of Cabernet Franc. And just in this particular glass, I think the very best attributes of both come through. For me, Cabernet Franc always lends a kind of shimmery texture in a blend, and it's definitely there. It's adding a glassy kind of finish to the wine. It's very, very good quality.
Fantastic, thank you.
That notion of polished tannins that somebody often writes about, I think it might be Advocate, is definitely there. And this wine in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, wow. I'm actually wondering, thinking back to 09 and tasting the 09s relatively the same period after release as we're tasting these 19s, I'm wondering if how many more will show the same levels of quality so early. Maybe that's a pattern. 9 is emulating 19, or 19 emulating 9.
That's what the great and the good are comparing it, and
are they?
Yeah, and the 2020 comparing to 2010. So again, you're getting two superb vintages, 9 and 10 together, one after the other. One being more masculine, the 09 being more masculine than the 10.
Yeah.
And the same thing seems to have occurred 19 and 20.
Colin's getting green pepper on this 3. I'm not seeing that, but now that you mentioned it, I will undoubtedly. For me, the dominant ones out of Rouget are there's that squid ink, undoubtedly, that just prevails. And I think for me, that's the dominant note on the nose. But there's an intensity and a musculature to the wine that's really good. Sleekness. Yeah, so we're on to the Haut Batailley. Slightly more expensive this time. Now we're in Pauillac, often seen as one of the top 2 or 3 regions. It was part of the Batailley family until the 40s. The big debate is they often attribute Haut Batailley to show more feminine characteristics and Batailley more masculine by comparison. I don't really have a view on it one way or another, but the Haut Bataillys that I've been lucky enough to taste from 2000, 2005, and 2010 have certainly shown a kind of powdery nuance, a talc nuance on the nose, and a softness and a perfume component that I don't recall ever having out of Batailley. Chocolate and wonderful tannin. My goodness. Obviously, there's a drying kind of tannic component at the moment because it's just so ridiculously young. Yeah, I put that note in there about the blend. References are talking 76-24 on the blend, but I'm wondering about Cabernet Franc in here, mainly because of the phenolics.
No.
None?
I'd be shocked if there was.
I'm wondering about a splash of it in there somewhere.
Nah, they'd get run out of town.
Yeah. So it's now owned by the Cars family, who own Lynch Barge, which is another label that I'm totally obsessed with. And the impact of the Cars ownership came into play 2 vintages ago in the 07. I see in the winery notes that there's now a second label coming out called Verso. Not sure whether that's going to start in 20 or not. I've certainly not seen anything, maybe you might have learned, on the market of a second Haut Batailley label.
Yeah, I did. I passed.
Yep. How does it sit price-wise? Do you recall?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Yeah. Definitely more violets. Definitely more that sort of purple flower thing for me. And maybe in terms of phenolics, what I really love about this one is the really strong focus of the nose. It's just Very, very defined. Yeah. More of a graphite finish than the others. Maybe slate, that kind of component. In fact, that graphite component is on the nose and palate for me. These might be the best tannins so far for me of the 3 reds.
So far, yeah.
Yeah. And possibly the most alcohol. I didn't keep a note of that.
Okay.
Got to say, going back to wine number 2, the Carlmagnus, it's definitely suffering now by comparison on the nose. It's sort of leaning into just savory, sort of pancetta nose. It doesn't show the staying power of the other 2. Oh, amazing. Amazing, amazing wine. So, Mr. Martin's reference of elegant and feminine, if that's elegant and feminine, I'm all over it. I think that's really great. Somebody was talking about a dried mint or a dried green herb kind of aspect to it, and certainly if any of those 3 have it, it's that one. I was thinking chicory, but it's probably better as a dried component. So La Dominique, Saint-Emilion. The points are all pretty much the same for all of these. So we can, what's quite nice is to actually ignore the points and actually just look at the wines themselves, which I seldom get a chance to do. So we've got mainly Merlot, then some Cab Franc. Not sure percentages, it was hard to find. Interesting piece of useless information is that this was started by money from the Caribbean. They weren't particularly clear about what kind of money it was, but hence the name Dominique, named after the isle. Then changed hands several times. The Bancourt family who owned Gazin were the main people to take it from just a hobby farm to something of importance. And now the Ferrats. And like the Bonnies have come from humble places, but have saved this wonderful name of a winery. They made their money from laying bricks and are now an international real estate firm. Gone on to create Chateau Ferrat and Clement Pichon. Clement Pichon I've had a little bit of. Location-wise, again, very close to Cheval. And the point was made that the closer one gets to Pomerol, whilst still in Saint-Emilion, amps up the chances for freshness and a certain notion of energy from the terroir. And the suggestion is that in 2019, Dominique's doing that. I have to say that the one thing that strikes me quite a lot over all these wines is the judicious use of oak. You know, I'm just thinking about south of the border, how much new oak's used and how much it overblows the varietals. They talk about 50 to 70% new oak. I'd swear this isn't 70% new. It's just so subtly presented. And this is the first winery that we're looking tonight that has any kind of serious reference to biodynamics. It's quite weighty. It's quite fleshy in the mid palate. And that notion of muscularity that somebody writes about is there, I think, more overtly than the Rouget. Number 3.
Structure. That's just the structure of these last 2 wines. The way the tannins,
level, isn't it? Yeah.
the way the tannins are layered, and unmistakably Bordeaux, that's for sure. Yeah.
This is the one that I can think of finding a New World reference in terms of the Cabernet, the ripeness of the Cabernet. It's the first one that I might make a mistake with if I was doing it blind.
You reckon?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the new stuff like the Woodlands and a couple of those from Margaret River that have this on the nose, the ripeness of the Cabernet on the nose, the palates.
Yeah. But that tannic structure, seriously?
Yeah.
Actually, Rob, I agree with you. I thought of Woodlands when I drank this.
Yeah. It's got this. There's definitely that was the first label I could think of going down the rabbit hole. I think that overall, if one takes the guns, right? So Mosswood, Voyager, Woodlands, I guess would be the 3 one considers.
Yeah.
Woodlands is the most like this of those. Mosswood's oak treatment is a little.
Colin?
No, I think with Vanya's incorporation of Merlot, her interpretation for me is always more subtle than the purer Cabernets from Margaret River.
Okay.
I think that the fact that she's blending that 30% in is a bit of a change. And also because she's so biodynamically oriented, the results that come out of the wine have a very specific stamp to them. I don't think Woodlands is biodynamic, not that I can ever remember, ever recall reading that. Yeah. What's nice is, yeah.
So the only thing I'd say, to me, it's probably slightly more austere than Woodlands. That's probably the only difference, but I think they're pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Mate, have you had a look at any of the 19?
No. So I've been in Singapore 6 years. I used to drink a load of Woodlands, a lot of it.
Okay.
And it's really hard to get here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember having a difference of opinion when years ago, would be about 10 years ago, when the Woodlands guy was here.
Yeah.
And he quite rightly said to me that charging $100, I think it was going to be $100 a bottle for the Woodlands Cabernet, was 50% too little. And it's the first winery. I mean, Lewin counts as it more because he does the wine buying for us, aka or Nalaya and co. But it's the first time that I can never remember being told by a winery they don't want me because I'm charging too little for their brand. So I'll always remember it.
Yeah.
And I've been telling you the same ever since.
I know. It's great to compare Haut Batailley and La Dominique, obviously different regions and what have you, but as characters, as expressions, they're vastly different from each other. It would be quite hard in a blind to say, okay, they're both 2019s. It'd be very easy to acknowledge that they're from different parts of Bordeaux, without question.
Yeah, I'm just impressed by the ripeness in all these wines. They're ripe. I mean, one of my gripes about Bordeaux is that for centuries, they kept on picking it at 12% and 12.5% alcohol and telling you, shut up, it's ripe. And it never was. It never was. And that all this New World rubbish at 13.5, sacre bleu. That was just a sin. Right? Now that they're producing wines at 13.5 to 14.5, it's different now. These are ripe.
Yeah, they're ripe but subtle.
So if these are ripe and subtle, the last 200 years, what have we actually been drinking? We've been drinking unripe Bordeaux, which I've been told, as in the Emperor's New Clothes, you will shut up and enjoy.
However, Lou, the one point that I'd raise on that whole trajectory is, if you look at 09 and 010, without question, 9 was the riper of the two vintages on release.
Yep.
But with the benefit of 10 years now, 2010 is definitely a better wine from a Bordeaux expression. Wouldn't you agree with that viewpoint?
Sure,
in terms of structure and form?
Sure, but they're all running at alcohol levels of 13.5 plus.
Right.
All right. So that's my point. I think the global warming has actually helped Bordeaux massively.
Yes.
So we're not, sucking on unripe vine juice, which we did for 300 years and told that that's the world's best.
Yeah.
That's always my problem with comparing New World and classic Bordeaux.
Yeah.
Being told that something that was generally unripe was the world's benchmark. This is more about it. This is what it's all about. These wines are better than what they, in my view anyway.
Than they were 20 years ago.
They're better than what they were 20 years ago, full stop.
So finishing off in Pessac Léon, and again, interesting to see Monsieur Michel Rolland's name popping up again. He's popped up once or twice with the labels that we represent out of Italy. And Bernard Magres is something of he's a kingmaker. He has more than 40 wineries in Bordeaux alone, without even taking into account his international acquisitions and ownerships. He's a regular attendee on the Decanter Power List in terms of wine people around the world. And to many, he can't go wrong. I have to say that Pape Clement is something that I've fallen deeply and darkly in love with because of its consistent level of quality. 50% Mola, 50 cab. With all the money that the Magres operation has, everything is done right, hand harvested. There's no machines allowed anywhere near the vines. No chemicals used. A couple of years ago, Livex reimagined the 1855 classification, and I found that quite interesting from a marketing point of view because I've got so many problems with 1855 as a boys' club and who they decided they were going to include. What's that?
You should have a problem with it.
It's absurd. Who they allowed in. And then they allowed another Rothschild in later because they made a noise to begin. It's just, But anyway, so Livex came up with their reimagined one and they decided that this has a shot of being a second growth. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's extraordinary. I remember sitting with Lou and Diane with Stephen Spurrier some years ago when he spoke about Pape Clement 09 at that particular dinner. Yeah. And for him, it seemed to be a game changer for him. That was the year that it got 100 points. So it was, and I remember his look of absolute surprise when he mentioned it to us that night, that this label has become so important. And it really has come from nowhere. And it's a lot to do with those two people. No question about it. Sometimes I look at the Roland consultancy with a certain measure of skepticism because how can you run 100 vintages in the Northern Hemisphere alone and have the right impact? Those are my problems with wine consultancies. But if this is an example of how he can get it right, bring it on. It's probably my...
Well, he's got a formula, right? And in terms of his formula, he insists that the grapes do not get picked until they're at a certain bone, or bone, whatever you want to pronounce it. He then assiduously chooses what oak he uses. He matches it to the particular terroir that he's picking. Right. So, I mean, it's quite scientific the way he does it, but it's not a fluke. He goes about it very methodical, and he's got a team.
The thing I'd like to know, Lou, is how often does he visit the vines during the year? Because there's a lot of people who will say, bollocks to the actual winemaking, you're just a caretaker at that point. It's about how the vines are cared for through their trajectory. And I'd be interested to know the answer to that, because that must be important.
Well, for instance, he does the wine at Capri.
Yeah.
In in Italy, right? Arnaldo Caprai, the Sagrantino in Umbria. And they told us on our last visit that he basically turns up for a week to make sure that the grapes are picked at the right donor.
Yeah.
And then he just sends his team in, and then he comes in for a day or two to check the ferments, and he's off. So clearly he places a large emphasis on what other people do rather than what he does.
Okay.
Which is clever.
Well, the rumours I've read or heard are it's six-figure euro sums for Roland to be involved. And I think in this instance, I think it's money well spent. What's great, I've become, since the 09, I've become quite obsessed with this label, and I've probably been lucky enough to taste everything since then. I can taste aspects of 09 in this. I don't think it's exactly the same. I think that the tannic structure here misses the early tannic structure of the 09. There was a perfection in the 09 form at an early stage. Maybe this is one which will evolve longer. But the one thing that parlays for me out of the palette is that shaved lead pencil component, which is in every single vintage I've ever had. It's definitely a house stamp. A bit lighter, Haosheng. Yeah, well, certainly for me, 9 was riper at this stage. And for me, 9 was more finessed than this from a tannic structure point of view. There was more going on in 9 and 10 at this early stage than there's going on here. But maybe it's a different animal.
I mean, to me, if you're doing a textbook tasting of left bank, trying to teach people, what left bank is all about, it's all about shaved pencil, right? This is a textbook example. Absolute textbook. And if because wankers like us run around saying, "Oh, shaved pencils." The normal public looks at you and goes, "What's wrong with these idiots?" Right? This is it. This is precisely what it is. That shaved pencil, cedary lead aspect that comes out, and it encapsulates the flavour, the shaved pencil. Because you can remember when you're in primary school, shaving your pencil, that odour that came off the...
Yeah, without question.
Exactly it. It's exactly
it. I would say, to Haosheng's point about the weight component, the other thing that's different about this at its early stage is a note that Lou's quite good at picking up, is that crushed ants, that acerbic kind of thing, which is not here. And I remember it being in the early vintages. It's something else that is not quite the same. The reference to Pape Clement, I mean, the Catholic Church is involved in every winery I can ever imagine. So from Dom Perignon downwards. So I'm not absolutely sure of the history behind why Pape Clement has the name, but I'm sure there's a pope or two that owned it during the years.
Oh, he probably had a mistress there or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Standard stuff. We Catholics know how to enjoy our pleasures. We're not allowed any, so the ones that we have, we keep secret.
But it's extraordinary, like in these years of doing research on wineries, the church is, especially in Italy, to France to maybe a less degree, but my God, at one point they must have run the booze trade in Italy for a couple of centuries.
It was illegal for anyone but the monks to make up.
Yeah.
That's the reason for it. And of course, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, there's a whole history to that. That's where the Pope moved from Rome because he was being persecuted and moved to Avignon and set up the second papacy in France for, I think it lasted about 80, maybe 90 years.
So effectively, the Vatican was in Avignon. Is that what?
No,
de facto?
There were two.
Oh, okay.
It was schism. Anyway, this is not a history lesson, but
yeah.
Needless to say that my mob, the Catholics,
Yeah.
just made it up as they went along, and they had a lot of booze fueling their philosophy.
Sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it?
And